3, 2.
Welcome to the current events program sponsored by the Archbishop Michael J. Curley Assembly of the Fourth Degree Knights of Columbus. The Knights of Columbus have 4 principles: charity, unity, fraternity, and patriotism. Patriotism, or love of God and country, is the principle of the fourth degree. Our assembly produces and promotes these programs for the edification of its members and for the community. I have been selected as your host for this performance. By way of introduction, my name is Charlie Kenny. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus for over 35 years. I'm a past Grand Knight of Prince George's Council, Knights of Columbus. I'm a past faithful navigator of the Archbishop Michael J. Curley Assembly, and I'm currently the Financial Secretary of the Prince George's Council. Our topic tonight is Behind the Large Door, and our guest for the evening is Paul Fisher, the author of that book. Now, Paul was born in March of 1921 in Indiana. He is the youngest of 8 children. He attended the parochial schools in Indiana. He subsequently graduated from Notre Dame University, did his graduate work at Georgetown and American University here in Washington, D.C. He was very active during the war, World War II that is. He was with the Office of Strategic Services, Army Intelligence during the Korean War. He spent 23 years in civilian intelligence and security work. For 8 years, he was a legislative and a personal aide to Congressman James Delaney, New York, who was the chairman of the Committee on Rules in the House of Representatives. He's been a Washington correspondent for the Triumph magazine, National Catholic Register, Twin Circle, and the Wanderer newspaper. He's a very well-known author, having written the book Behind the Large Door, Church, State, and Freemasonry in America, which he now followed up with a new book, Their God is the Devil. He married a Canadian gal in 1948. He's the parent of 9 children, 6 girls and 3 boys. He resides in Indiana. He's home here at the Christmas time to see his family live in the Washington area. Paul, you wrote 2 books on Masonry. One was Behind the Closed Door, Behind the Large Door, rather, and the other one is Their God is the Devil. Might want to...
Yeah, this is the Behind the Large Door, and this is the Their God is the Devil.
Right. Now, why are you so interested in Freemasonry? Why did you write the book?
Well, I really knew nothing about Masonry. I had been interested, you mentioned the children I have, we had to educate those kids, and because the state requires that all children between the ages of 6 and 14 will be educated, we chose to educate our children in a Catholic educational environment. Right. And I thought, since the church mandates that they should be educated, it should give you some assistance in getting that education. But the fact is that they don't give you any assistance if you happen to attend a conventional religious school. I say conventional religion because one man's religion is another man's philosophy.
Right.
So secular humanism is rampant in parochial schools. And so I started researching the Constitution to see just why my kids couldn't, for example, get on a public school bus that passed by the parochial school our children attended. And I found rather quickly that the state of Maryland, which they resided at the time, had 2 decisions by the Maryland Court of Appeals, which is effectively the Supreme Court of Maryland, right, which in fact said that those children can get on a public school bus if that bus in its way to a public school passes
to another school,
near
right,
and by a Catholic school, they can get on. But the fact is that this was not implemented, and from that little background I got interested in the religion clause of the First Amendment. And I became active with, I think, a group you had on here very recently, Citizens for Educational Freedom. Right. And through that study, I couldn't find anything which, under the Constitution and under court opinions up until 1947, would have barred these children from getting educated, or getting at least school transportation, but indeed getting educated. And I think the GI Bill of Rights of World War II is an outstanding example of what raised the problem in my mind, because under the GI Bill, returning veterans, soldiers, sailors, airmen, could attend even a seminary, any school that was a legitimate school.
That's for sure.
So I pursued that study of the aid to education, and that's how I really got involved with Congressman Delaney, Jim Delaney of New York, who was the chairman of the powerful House Committee on Rules. I was his legislative assistant and his press officer. And Jim Delaney had a voucher proposal. He knew Jack Kennedy, the President Kennedy, very well. They served in Congress together. And he used to tell me he'd chase Jack Kennedy around the Oval desk in his Oval Office trying to cut his hair, which was a little long at the time. And Kennedy said, "Jim, you're going to vote for my aid to education bill." And Delaney said, "No, I'm not, Jack." He said, "I can't vote to discriminate, for discrimination." He said, "Your bill counts all students in as far as the amount of funds that will be spent on education, but they count Catholic kids out when it comes to allocating those funds. And I won't vote for such discrimination." But so I had pretty well exhausted my studies. This was probably in 1965 of the religion clause and constitutionality. But in 1971, there was an article in the Washington Post about the papers of Justice Frankfurter. And in those papers, it mentioned that Justice Hugo Black, who handed down a key decision, the seminal decision on aid to education, which established the phrase, which became a rule of law, a wall of separation between church and state.
The phrase that's not in the Constitution, but everybody believes it is, right?
That's right. And so he coined that phrase, which came from Thomas Jefferson, who was not a member of Congress when, never was a member of Congress, but he certainly wasn't in Congress when they crafted the religion clause.
That's right.
So in the Post articles, it mentioned that Justice Black, they quoted Justice Brandeis in Frankfurter's paper saying that Justice Black hasn't an ounce of, it's not discrimination, I forget what it was, a term that he's biased. I said, well, maybe that's it. And that struck me because Black wrote the majority opinion in this famous Everson case and its wall of separation.